So John, right now we have the 4 parts or the 4 sides of your box. Can you show us what we have?
Well, these 4 pieces have been taken through the same process we just identified there previously. And now it's time to cut the dovetails and put the box together.
So when you say the dovetails, we're talking about the joint here at the corner of the box.
Yes. This is called a mitered dovetail. There's a lot of ways to put this box together, but this is a pretty fancy way. It shows very well and really isn't that difficult to cut.
So when you say you have a mitered dovetail, you've got a 45-degree cut here at the top and down to the edge, and then the dovetails come together at the corner.
And same thing at the bottom. There's another miter in the bottom as well.
So,
because what that's doing is hiding those grooves that are plowed in the sides and end pieces.
So that way we don't see this coming out the end of the box.
Don't see a big old gaping hole, yes.
So, okay. So you've got 2 sides, and then your ends are different. So you've got one that's the back end, and then one that's a little shorter for the top to come in.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
All right.
Well, let me see how you do this.
Let's set this up so we have a sequence and an order that we're going to be cutting this in. What happens if you're not careful when you're cutting dovetails, you can get lost. And once you get lost, you begin to turn these things every which way but loose.
Okay.
So it's easier just to kind of get started correctly and then follow through with the same process. Now, we've got this outside face, we've got this V. I'm going to put that down and turn it in like this. Same thing with this one, the V's down, turn it in like this. The V's down, turn it outside. And in this case, there's not much can go wrong with this one.
You only have one groove, but all the bottom edges are here.
All the bottom edges are going to be flush when the box is put together, hopefully.
Okay, okay.
So to keep track of things, what we're going to do is we're going to mark this board number 1 and this board number 4. Going to mark this board 1 and this one 2. This one 2. This one 3. This one 3, and this one 4.
So you basically have 4 corners.
4 corners, so if you set this box up like this, it's going to look like this, and you can follow your numbers around to make sure that they're all in the correct orientation. So it's 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4.
Gotcha.
And what I do now is to kind of keep even further record of where I am. I just put a little X right on the top of each of these so that now the bottom's down, the top's up, and I've got the correct orientation.
Gotcha.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to come back. We're going to mark a baseline for these dovetails, and we're going to use this marking gauge to draw a line all the way around. So just put this on the bench like this, draw this across.
So this line is very close to the thickness of the material?
Yes, it's the exact thickness of the material. It's called a baseline. We're going to saw down to that line when we're cutting the dovetails. And numbers 1, 2 get a mark across the top and the bottom because that's going to be mitered. 4 doesn't get one across the top because we're going to leave that without a miter joint so that the box has a place to slide into.
Okay.
What I like to do now is go back and make sure I've got all my orientation correctly. So we got 1, 1, 2, and 2, 3, 3, and 4, 4. So I start with number 1, put this up in the vise, and we're going to cut the tail on this board. And it's good to put this plumb. That way you're always going to be cutting from a straight angle.
Gotcha.
A straight angle, from a straight perspective. If I'm in my shop, I would not mark this, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to mark these. And I just kind of eyeball this. You can use dividers. There's a lot of ways you can mark this off.
But you just lay them out to look good to your eye?
To my eye, yes. I try to make them look good to my eye. Now I come back, I've marked these half tails because that's going to be the miter joint.
Okay.
And then in the center, I'm just going to eyeball the center. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put in 2 tails here. Just like that. Then I'm going to come in here, away from that center line, give me a couple of marks. So this is going to be the two tails. These are going to be the two miter joints.
Got you.
And we'll basically follow that process all the way through. I try to cut all these going the same way so I don't have to reorientate my body.
So you're angling that saw 6, 7, 8 degrees, something like
Yes,
that?
just cutting it by eye.
Now you're coming back and cutting the other angle.
Yes. Now, I could really batter on that saw and could press through there, but the key is to make nice smooth strokes so that you get nice crisp lines. And
Once you get going on an angle, you just stick with it.
stick with it, and the crisper these lines are, the better it's going to look. Pull out my 1/4-inch chisel here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to come back and put a little V groove right there,
Gotcha.
like that, chip that out. And then I'm going to take my marking gauge and I'm going to deepen that just a little bit more.
Right there where
Right there
you
where
need to
that's
take
going to
that
be chopped
material,
out. Which means I've got a good chance of getting a nice, crisp shoulder line. I don't know if you can pick that up on
So
camera or
you're
not,
basically doing this instead of chopping right from the beginning so that it doesn't
so I don't
work
move
its
that
work
line
its
back.
way in. Yeah.
And with pine, it's a tendency to move for that line to move back. So this is a process that I've just started using actually, but I think it's a good one. And you'll notice these tools are pretty sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And the sharper your tools are, the easier it is to work wood. And I'm gonna put this up on here. I'm gonna set on it, and I'm gonna chop that out. I start on the inside
Okay.
and just put my chisel down there. I try to angle this just 1 or 2 degrees, so I'm making a bit of a V.
Slightly. Excuse me. Sorry.
Hardly even noticeable.
So you're slightly undercutting it so that the outside surface will fit tight.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a little giveaway there, kind of help you. I just make light cuts. I don't have anywhere to go this afternoon, so I'm just going to make sure I keep that baseline as close to the perfection as I possibly can. Chop that much on this side.
So again, you're working in nice patient fashion, so you'll get a clean cut and won't have to do a lot of fitting later on. It'll
Yeah,
just-
if you can get this to come into a fit right off the saw, the joints tend to be always a little bit better in my estimation. And right here, this process is where you can really mess up. So just kind of take your time, and it's a pleasure to be able to chop these out. You know? No router whining, no jig to set up, just kind of working at a pace that's very, very pleasurable. Now I could just chop on through that, but I'm gonna make a couple more cuts here, and the surface left in there is going to be a lot cleaner. Now I feel like I can probably see that released. And there's just a
There you go.
little bit of work needs to be done there with a pocket knife.
Just right in the corner inside.
Actually, it was part of the center that didn't cut out as crisp as it should. It's just laying there. So I just kind of knocked that out. Just kind of laying there. So I don't know if you can see this on camera or not, but all those lines are, in fact, I'm going to go back and straighten that up just a little bit with a chisel. It's just kind of dangling there like a loose tooth of a first grader.
Right there in the center of the
Yes.
center of the board.
So if you can see that on camera, all those lines are pretty crisp, hardly any tear out. And there would probably be just a minuscule of difference in the angles, but to me, if you look at Priceless Antiques, that's the way they were done.
And it's a little bit more noticeable now with the contrast of the space, but when you put the box together, you're not going to even notice that. And if you do, it's just a natural
It's a natural look of an antique
natural
piece.
look. That's great.
What we're going to do is put number 1 right on the,
So this is the end of your box.
this is the end of the box. We're going to transfer the tails to the pins.
Mm-hmm.
And this process makes it pretty easy. Now, I'm getting old and I like to use a pencil, but these are so small, it's really a challenge to get a pencil down in there.
Right.
So I want to make sure I've got all my orientation correctly. So I've got the V's on this side, I got the X's on this side, so I know I'm right.
And the outside of the box is showing outside up and outside to you?
Yes. And at a pretty much of a right angle.
Uh-huh.
So what I'm doing now is I'm making sure this bottom edge is flush with one another, and that this edge here is pretty much even with the tail piece. I'm going to come back in here. I'm just going to make a really light cut, just to keep things as simple as you possibly can. There's nothing wrong with putting this up here like this, and how I mark this. This is going to be a miter. That's my miter mark. This is going to come out, and this is going to come out, and then that small portion is going to remain.
So you're basically just using this board to make sure that you're putting an X on the pieces of wood that come away.
Yeah.
It's always easy to mark what you want to take away.
Yeah.
Or it's important to mark what you want to take away.
Again, if you get this incorrect at this point, there ain't but one thing to do, and that's to make your box shorter. So, if you'll put that up for me there on the edge of the...
Okay.
Now, I like to set on these boards when I'm chopping them out, but this board is just so short. It's really a challenge to do that. So what I'm going to do is cut these, and I'm going to cut from the inside out. I know a lot of guys do that differently, but for me, I have a better orientation with my iron hand from this angle.
So the inside of the box is facing you?
Yes. So we're going to saw just to the inside of that line on the very same line that it's going. I'm just going to
And again, you're cutting all one direction, one side of the joint first.
I try to do that
at the same
yes.
angle.
It just keeps things a little bit simpler. Saw wander just a little bit right there when what I'm doing is I'm putting my thumb right against the saw as it's right against the line and keeping pressure back on my thumb.
So you're just using the back of your thumbnail so you won't scratch it?
As a fence, yes. Now I'm going to come back and cut these miter joints here. And I don't want to go through this edge, but I want to cut the saw kerf down to the bottom of my baseline. So I'm going to start with an angle like this. And I'm going to take that saw kerf out to the edge, lower my hand, cut to the baseline.
So now you're just cutting at a 45-degree angle, so the tops and the bottom box will cover up that groove.
Yes. So out to the outside of the edge, you can put your finger there, you can kind of feel it, trying to saw straight down. Sawing straight down. I don't know if you can see this on camera or not, but these lines are pretty straight. You can tell from this position here that that line is almost perfectly straight up and down, which is really what you want. That's going to make the joint fit so much tighter. Now, I don't have to think about what I'm going to chop out because I've got a mark on it. And I'm just going to come in here, make that little V again. Now we're going to put this under this hold fast. Now I'm just going to chop to that line. Oops. See, that's nice and solid, which means you're getting really nice, crisp cuts. Now we're going to cut the miters. And I try to cut these where they fit right off the saw. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Just put a mark on that from this corner to this baseline. And we're going to saw it and see what happens. Got this little saw here that I've set up to cross cut this miter with.
So this is a saw that's set with cross-cut teeth?
Yes.
And fairly fine?
Very fine, cross-cut teeth. It's got about 10 degrees of rake and about 12 to 14 degrees of fleam. So let's see what happens. Cutting just a little bit proud of that corner there. Flip it over. That looks pretty good, actually.
Yeah, it does look pretty good.
So I'm just letting the saw do the work there, just not trying to press through that, get a ragged edge on the bottom side.
Uh-huh.
Now that one's going to need just a bit of work because I'm a little off the line there, and it's just a little proud there on the end.
So what tool are you going to use to make that small adjustment?
I'm just going to use a little chisel.
Okay.
3/4 inch chisel.
And so you're now just working to your lines.
Yep, I'm going to go from this line to that corner. And if I can, I'm going to try to undercut that just a wee bit. And I'm talking about such a small amount, it's hardly perceptible. This one looks like it's okay right off the saw. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes,
Another
sir.
joint?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we've got to get one. Going to get this one back in the vise. And we've got to mark our miters on that. That would be a shorter box if I made that cut.
So it's important to have the long point on the outside of the box?
Yes. Now it's very important when I finish up this cut that I really slow down when I come to the bottom here, because if I don't, I'm going to get a little tear out, and that's going to show up in the joint. You know, let's see what that looks like.
Okay.
Let's put that together and see what we got.
Oh, that looks great. It's not having to hit it.
As you mentioned that, I probably am going to hit it just a little bit, just to kind of gentle persuasion.
Set it up.
That's probably about as good as you're going to do off the start there. We could
you're
fiddle with that just a little bit.
You're pretty close to flush there.
Pretty close to flush. And what's going to happen, Jay, when we put this together with glue, we're going to compress those fibers. Those joints are going to come together. The wood's going to swell, and that will be like a pristine joint.
And so you've got your bottoms here, and your bottom is flush. And if there's any variation, there's just a little tiny bit of variation here, and you'll take it off in a minute when it's put together. That's great, though.
Okay, we would just repeat that process 4 different times, and you would have the box put together.
That's fantastic.
Okay.